Hello and welcome to another edition of World Talks coming at you from our Brussels studio. My name is Sascha Farbach. Now today we'll be talking all things Ukraine, German relations, what the new European Council presidency of Poland will look like, how that's going to impact things here in Brussels. Delighted to welcome our guest here in the studio, Lukas Sieper, an MEP from the Party of Progress, non-attached. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So Lukas, let's get right into it. Ukraine peace talks. We've had this new candidate, potentially maybe a new chancellor of Germany from the CDU, the Conservatives, Mr. Merz. He was in Kyiv and he was in Warsaw. Now he had some interesting things to say. What kind of, let's say, in your mind, does Merz represent? What kind of chancellor would he be, and how is he going to impact relations with Brussels and Kyiv?
I think Merz will try to break up with the remaining of the Merkel-Putin or Merkel-Russia politics, and in the same way do not try to get Germany too much involved. So I think you can see it from the way that he talks about Taurus, for example, and wants to deliver those systems to Ukraine. But that's also where his line of talking stops. So he is not going too far to the extreme. And therefore, I think we will see a bit less appeasement politic like Scholz is doing right now, but also not maybe everything that Ukraine needs in this situation.
But at the same time, interesting point, because Angela Merkel, very different Ostpolitik, yeah. Right? But as you said, I mean, we've had in the German parliament a statement by Mr. Merz saying that he would deliver Taurus missiles, those long-range weapons, to the Ukrainians, giving Putin an ultimatum. As you said, it's from the same party as Angela Merkel. That's kind of, is he really, is that true rhetoric, or is he just trying to appease some kind of other political goals here?
I think it's very funny, or to answer your question first, I think for him it's just campaigning. Mostly what he's doing right now. He is on full mode to becoming chancellor in his wishes and dreams. But I think what you mentioned is very important here, this ultimatum that he made to Putin. Now, if you just hear this ultimatum, you would now maybe think that he will give Ukraine everything and do and push and push and push. But just a few days later, he was a guest in a talk show, and the moderator asked him about this ultimatum, and then he actually denied that he had given an ultimatum. And then the moderator of the talk show showed him the clip with the ultimatum speech, and he kind of backpedaled. So I think in this situation that, of course, was the product of press work and not his marketing line that he wanted to push through for the election campaign, you could see that he might not put his money so much where his mouth is right now.
Okay. He's also proposed this kind of a new contact group, 5 countries, including Poland and Germany, France, Great Britain, to kind of be ready for a change of policy in Washington, D.C. Again, do you think this will see more, let's say, an active Germany in terms of providing more weapons to Ukrainians, having more leadership in terms of what we haven't seen so much from Scholz and his coalition?
This I agree on. I think we will see a more active Europe after Trump takes office. Why? Because on the one hand, we now know from the first Trump presidency, and let's be honest, he has not changed in any way. He's just gotten worse. We know that it will be a very chaotic and unreliable USA on the other side of the Atlantic, and therefore you can now see this understanding developing inside the EU, inside the Parliament, inside the national governments, that we have to take up responsibility. And once again, of course, it is a tool for Merz as a possible chancellor to strengthen Germany's role in the modern European world. If we are part of this new contact group and our leading figure there, of course, this gives us as Germany political weight in the arena. And I think this is what he is pursuing, because he knows that Scholz is one of the weakest German chancellors that we had for a long time. I mean, he didn't even manage to hold his government together. So I think he wants to set a different example there.
Mm-hmm. And let's look at, I think, the latest polls just from the last few days in Germany. The CDU, this party of Mr. Merz and CSU, they're looking at about 32%. Yeah. So top position there. SPD about 16, 17. One thing that really surprised, I think still surprises many people, has some worried, is AFD, yeah, right, which is around 19 to 20%. So, I mean, he's ruled out making a coalition with them. But let's say they do so well. I mean, are we able to keep the AFD out? What does the return of such a high level of AFD mean in elections in the spring?
I reckon hopefully nothing. The AfD in its core is an extremist party. It's an undemocratic party that wants to tear down the liberal democracy that we have in Germany right now, that we have in Europe. It is supervised by the German constitution, surveillance services, exactly for that. And even though Merz is overtaking a lot of far-right populistic rhetoric because he knows he needs these people back. If that works, it's a different question. I think no, but he tries to get those voters back. I am strongly convinced that there will be no coalition of any kind where the AfD is actually involved.
Okay, and looking at if a lot of ifs involved, but like you're looking at Merz going to be in charge of Germany. Looking at his presence in Brussels, where do you see challenges, where do you see opportunities with him?
I think he will lead the charge in Germany's interests inside European politics. So I think we might see a Germany that looks more onto its own and less on the European idea, which is a challenge of its own. And I think this is something where it differs from Merkel a lot. She also looked for Germany first, but she managed to wrap it up a little nicer before giving it to the European Union. So I think the pro-democratic camp who wants to develop the European idea inside the German delegations will have a harder time. I think especially for smaller parties like us inside the European Parliament, it's going to be even easier with the Chancellor Merz, because he stands for this old-fashioned establishment style of politics that made a lot of people lose trust. I mean, he comes from BlackRock. He, as said, he uses populist rhetoric whenever it suits him. The CDU is a very, very hierarchical party. So the style of politics that will come with Merz, while not being progressive in a political sense, will open up a lot of angles of opportunities for new political players.
All right, so maybe another leadership role there for Germany. Haven't seen that so much with the Scholz government at the moment. Let's also look at a major topic which we've seen in the last few days, of course, with Syria. Collapse of the Assad regime there, a lot of uncertainty. In terms of looking at what happens next, I know that Germany has already, including Austria and Poland and some other countries, have frozen these asylum applications from Syria. Migration is a big, major deal. This is something also that the European Parliament, a long time with institutions, we have this huge migration pact, which was criticized as not being good enough. It's not even fully implemented yet. So where does that stand now, given what's happened in Syria? Are we going to see now another change to this migration policy? What's next in your view?
I think the far right will definitely try to push for that. I don't think we will necessarily see a change in the Asylum and Migration Pact, because even though it was highly discussed in the Parliament again and in the Commission and everywhere else, we have a decision already, and this decision needs to be implemented. And in my opinion, it's a waste of time to reopen this on a general level. Of course, now with the people from Syria, we have a strong argument for part of the people to go back, and I think this is what definitely the far right will push for over and over again. They will say, oh, now it's secure, let's send them back. I think the difficulty here is to realize that most of those people from Syria, they are not here for half a year or even 2 years. They came in 2014 and 2015, and since then they have built up lives. They own shops, they have houses, they have children that have been born in Europe. So I think this whole Syrian situation is another opportunity for us as Europe, as a society, to develop an understanding on how do we interact with people from other cultures coming to us. Do we want to see them as a part, or do we want to see them as guests? And I hope that in the end we will come to the conclusion that those people who actually build up a life here with us and who are paying taxes, who are following the rules or interacting with their communities, are seen as a part of that community. Because if the whole Syrian situation has shown us one thing, then that we are all humans after all, who need to live together in peace and not in violence and suppression.
Sure, but at the same time, hasn't it been one of the main challenges these last years that, it was Chancellor Angela Merkel very much who said that we would make it, opening very much borders for countless hundreds of thousands, millions of people who came. Isn't this exactly what has led to the rise of the far right in many countries in Europe, to migration being a major thing. And I think, how do you see this play? I mean, it's a tricky subject, but at the same time, how does your group and your experience as an MEP view this? Like, what is the next? Because it's a balance of values, as you said, but also security. And migration has been, as you said, one of the main points that the far right has very much pointed on.
I mean, being a non-attached member, I can only speak for my party, not for any group. But as you say, or what you say is correct. Of course, it leads to a lot of challenges. And I think, especially in Germany, we saw with the smaller towns and cities being overwhelmed by the amount of people that they had to manage. So I would not contest this in any way. I think that migration, and my party thinks that migration comes with challenges, yes, but also with a lot of opportunities. And the discussion should not about how big are the challenges solely, but it should be, are the opportunities more advantageous than the challenges? And I think yes, because we have a demographic problem in Germany and in all of Europe. We need more young people to actually sustain our pension schemes. We have way too less educated people to fill certain jobs. And this is not only about engineers or something like that. We need people who work in the hospitals and to take care of the elderly. And also we have the situation that most of the countryside dries empty because all the young people go to the cities. So I think in the end, if we would manage it right, migration would be way more advantageous for us and would be an opportunity for us also in our global contest with players like the USA, who has been an immigration country since it was founded, like China, like Russia. I think the way that we managed migration in the last decade was a total disaster. And this needs to change. And this disaster led to people disbelieving in the system and disbelieving in government and disbelieving in the classical political players. And this is why the far rights and the extremists and the populists are on the rise. But I don't think that this should lead us into a situation where we should just try to avoid migration, because migration is a fact of life. We cannot stop it. And the people who are suffering, they will always look for a better place. And everyone who really thinks that this could stop at some point, I would just invite to just imagine a world where he is persecuted in his home, or his home is bombed, or his life is destroyed, and what he would do. And I think for 99% of the people, the answer would be, if I have no opportunities where I am, I go somewhere else. And that's what we have to accept as a fact of life.
But at the same time, I think migration, that's a big one to tackle now. And just, I don't want to give one single answer here, but what you mentioned as well is, you mentioned certain people fleeing from war, and then we have economic migrants. So we have to make those distinctions. And when you said that this policy has not been working, do you see that more as a failure, let's say on national level in Europe, Germany, whatever, Sweden, or was it on a European institutional level? Where does, I don't want to say blame, but let's say where is the challenge here, and where is the best solution going to come out of this?
I think it is a failure on all sides, actually, including the migrants. So I think, first of all, migration to be a successful happening in society, it needs integration. Integration needs both sides. The people need to want to be integrated, and the state needs to want to integrate them. I just heard a very good quote last week to show the side that we as a society didn't do enough to integrate them. I was at an event, and there was someone who was the child of guest workers, Turkish guest workers who came to Germany, and he said something. He said, guest worker is a very interesting phrase if you think about it, because guests normally do not need to work. So we had this crazy impression about those people, and that's why we put them all in the same spot in one city, and that's why they had their own society built up there. But then on the other hand, those people maybe should have taken more effort into actually learning our language, integrating our society, and all of that. On a European level, I think it is the member states itself who have to take most of the blame on the national level, but also the member states on the European level. I think when it comes to migration, there was no unified approach on the European level. Germany said, open the doors. Wir schaffen das, the famous quote. We will make it. But the Poles, and we're sitting here on Polish TV after all, they were not so fond of the idea. The Hungarians also not so fond of the idea. The Spaniards said, yeah, in general we agree with helping people, but we cannot manage the amount that comes to our shores. So every European state was kind of fighting for its own. And for me, it blows my mind that there was a reform of the EU migration and asylum policies just in 2024. And before that, we had this Dublin system for eons.
So basically, the EU basically missed its opportunity to do something more faster, which I think some would say they missed opportunities on several factors. Now running to catch up. But just on last point, I'm running out of time, but with Poland as well, which people don't know, even before the full-scale invasion, Poland had already taken in many, many Ukrainians, and I think that was one of the issues that was part of all this. So that's for another time. Look, Lukas Sieper, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Thanks. And thank you for watching. That concludes this World Talks from our Brussels studio. I'm Sascha Farbach, and see you next time. Goodbye.